Hello and welcome. I'm Pranay Upadhyay and you are watching World Today. After Putin-Modi phone call last week, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke over the phone today. In that telephonic conversation, President Zelensky apprised Prime Minister Modi of latest on Russian invasion, attacks on the Ukrainian cities, including the recent shelling on the city of Zaporizhia. Zelensky urged India to support peace efforts and emphasized that the decision regarding Ukraine's future should have Ukrainian participation. Prime Minister Modi also reaffirmed India's steadfast and consistent position on peaceful settlement of the conflict and support for efforts aimed at earliest restoration of peace. Zelensky, on his social media account X, also said that he had discussed sanctions against Russia. He wrote on X that it's necessary to limit the export of Russian energy, particularly oil, to reduce its potential and ability to finance the continuation of this war. Both leaders also agreed to plan a personal meeting in September during the United Nations General Assembly. Now the world awaits for the much-hyped President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin's meeting scheduled on August 15. After much of Trump's disappointment with the Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin and after levying additional tariffs on India for purchasing Russian oil, President Trump is now going to meet Putin in Alaska, though in the absence of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Sources say that Alaska resort in the city of Gridwood in Alaska is being considered as the venue for the meeting.
Coming Friday, the much-anticipated meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin is going to take place in Alaska. The announcement was made by Trump himself in a post on his Truth Social. And this meeting is being seen as a victory for Kremlin, even if there are 3 days more to go. But this meeting is not trilateral, as earlier suggested by Trump, but a bilateral meet as requested by the Russian president.
I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war, you got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. I think we'll have constructive conversations. There'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody for the good of Ukraine. Then I'm going to call up President Zelensky and the European leaders right after the meeting, yeah. And I'm going to tell them what kind of a deal. I'm not going to make a deal. It's not up to me to make a deal. I think a deal should be made for both.
As August 8 deadline for Russia to reach a deal on war with Ukraine came to an end, Trump's post came shocking to many. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and many European leaders had hoped that Trump, who has been expressing his disappointment with Putin over handling of the war, would impose strict economic sanctions post the deadline.
Everyone sees that there has been no real step from Russia towards peace. No action on the ground nor in the air that could save lives. That is why sanctions are needed. Pressure is needed. Strength is needed. The strength, first and foremost, of the United States. The strength of Europe. The strength of all nations in the world that want peace and stability in international relations. If Russia does not want to stop the war, then its economy must be stopped.
The meeting comes after US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's visit to Moscow last week. There are also concerns that Ukraine may have made certain territorial concessions, which President Zelensky has opposed.
The path to peace for Ukraine must be determined together and only together with Ukraine. This is fundamental, and it is important that our joint approaches and shared vision work toward a genuine peace, a consolidated position, a ceasefire, an end to the occupation, an end to the war. I thank everyone who is with us, who is with Ukraine.
Небезпеки враховують. Шлях до миру для України має визначатися разом.
from telling Zelensky that he was gambling with World War III during the latter's visit to the Oval Office early this year, to understanding a friend Putin and then being very disappointed, Trump's relation with Putin has seen many phases. On occasions when it just seemed that Trump is going to sanction Russia, Moscow's allies were the worst hit. With the exception of China, India was imposed with an additional tariff of 25% for purchasing Russian oil. The Trump administration went to the extent of calling this additional charge from India as a national security issue. But India is hopeful of a positive outcome from this meeting and reiterates Prime Minister Narendra Modi's stand that this is not an era of war. A joint statement by leaders of Europe have also hailed Trump's efforts to bring an end to the war and ensuring peace in the region. But they are against any territorial changes and said peace in Ukraine can return only when Ukraine is included in the talks.
Darüber hat es in den letzten Tagen
We are preparing intensively for this meeting at the European level together with the American government. And we hope and assume that the government of Ukraine and the President Zelensky will participate in this meeting. We hope that there will be a breakthrough on Friday. Above all that, there will finally be ceasefire and that peace negotiations can take place in Ukraine.
Die Regierung der Ukraine, dass Präsident Zelensky an diesem Treffen beteiligt wird.
The meeting location is significant as US purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867. The last time Alaska took center stage in an American diplomatic event was in March 2021, when Joe Biden's newly minted diplomatic and national security team met their Chinese counterparts in Anchorage. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
But can Trump-Putin meeting bring an end to this deadly conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which is on since last 3 years? What is there on the agenda and what will be there on the table? To discuss it further, I am being joined by US Navy's retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, who is also a senior director at the Foundation for Defenses of Democracy. So welcome to World Today.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question to you would be that President Trump has recently said that he'll know within 2 minutes that if President Putin is serious about a deal and he plans to push for a ceasefire, whether discussing while discussing the territory swaps. How realistic it is to expect a constructive outcome for this Alaska summit, given President Putin's history of hard demands and rigid negotiations?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and I don't think there's a high likelihood of success for exactly that reason. Because one of two things is going to happen. Either Trump does the right thing and immediately tells Putin, you need to cease all your air attacks and stop combat operations along the line of contact, and then we can have a discussion, to which I think Putin will not agree. Or Trump does the wrong thing and continues to side with Putin in his request for a recognition of the 20% of Ukrainian territory he's held as his sovereign territory, which Europe and Ukraine will not support. So to me, there's a correct solution out of this. It's to put Putin to the same maximum pressure campaign that he put Zelensky in February, as your coverage showed.
But Admiral, if you have heard President Trump just a while ago, he said that he is going to tell President Putin that he has to give some territory back to Ukraine. With Zelensky not attending, how might this affect the negotiations, and do you see a risk of Ukraine being sidelined in these talks?
Yeah, this is a great question. First of all, there's no indication of what territory we're talking about. Putin has never agreed to pass back territory. I think Trump's emissary, Steve Witkoff, misunderstood Putin a week ago, and then that's created a significant challenge here. And without Zelensky present, you can't agree to the future borders of Ukraine. Ukraine's fought harder than the United States, harder than Europe, harder than anyone, to prevent Russia from grabbing this territory. They're not about to give it away at a negotiation they're not present at. It's not realistic.
Admiral, President Donald Trump is open to having another meeting with President Zelensky as well, because he said that, next meeting would be with President Zelensky, and he's going to give a call to President Zelensky, or maybe both leaders together. How could a ceasefire deal or lack thereof shape US foreign policy, particularly on the economic pressure like the India tariffs, and what are the strategic risks should we be watching out for?
So I'll answer that in two ways. The first is about the participation of Zelensky. That's why this first conversation should be a very direct one. Trump to Putin, knock it off. He sent him, texts that say, stop, Vladimir. He's told him in multiple phone calls to stop, and Putin's ignored him. So that's the first step. Then when you see Putin stop, you have a three-way conversation where you can have a legitimate discussion. But you don't do negotiations when Putin won't agree to a ceasefire. Now, on the question of sanctions, the United States made a mistake with its India sanctions. It should have done them against both India and China. Both countries have fueled the Russian war machine. And I get why. I understand why Prime Minister Modi wants the lower cost fuel. It drives India's economy. Xi Jinping feels the same way about China's.
Absolutely, Admiral. These are the part of India's energy security, because and also if you would recall that India bought Russian oil, keeping US in loop, US in confidence, because US the previous Biden administration gave a go ahead for that because it stabilized the international energy market.
But at this point, it's now its purpose is fueling the Russian war machine. I don't think India is responsible for the war.
So is the American purchase. So is the Turkish purchase. So is the European Union purchase. Every money going to Russia. Anyway,
America is not purchasing fossil fuels from Russia in anywhere near. I mean, you have to be clear. Two countries are the predominant buyers of the shadow fleet. And the United States isn't one of them. It's India and China. And I agree it was wrong to not hold China accountable. But holding India accountable is perfectly fine. India is profiting off the availability of the shadow fleet fuel at a lower cost because of the sanctions that Europe and the United States are putting on Russia. And look, at this point, I get it in the past, but now it's purely...
But Admiral, this also remains a question that US President Donald Trump is going soft on China, which is the biggest buyer of the Russian oil, and he's going hard on India. But thank you very much for your perspective. I'm running short of time, but thank you very much for being on my show. Thank you very much. And now, going up to another story from the technology world. Now, a landmark development in the global technology and the trade space, US chipmaker Nvidia and AMD have reportedly struck a deal to share 15% of their China AI chip revenues with the US government, a condition that clears the way for export licenses to resume. The move is being hailed by some as a smart balance between market access and strategic control, while critics warn it blurs the line between commerce and national security. And there is an India angle too, with potential opportunity for our growing semiconductor and AI sector. For more, watch this report.
It's nothing less than a groundbreaking development in global tech trade. US chip makers Nvidia and AMD have reportedly agreed to hand over 15% of their revenue from advanced AI chip sales in China to the US government. This unprecedented arrangement clears the way for export licenses to resume following earlier restrictions. While there is no official confirmation yet, as per reports, Nvidia will pay 15% of revenue from its H20 AI accelerator sold in China. AMD will do the same for its MI308 model. These payments are not taxes, but negotiated conditions to obtain the necessary export clearances. The revenue-sharing deal will give China access to the latest GPUs needed to power artificial intelligence data centers. The Trump administration earlier this year banned Nvidia's top-of-the-line H20 chip sales to China over national security concerns. After sustained lobbying, including a White House meeting by Nvidia's CEO, the restrictions have seemingly been eased. Analysts estimate that Nvidia could bring in around $23 billion in China sales of H20 chips in 2025, so a 15% share yields a substantial sum for US coffers. Critics argue the deal blurs the line between national security and revenue generation. Some experts warn it may even violate the US Constitution's prohibition on export taxes. Meanwhile, supporters say it gives US firms market access while reinforcing control over strategic technologies. From Washington's perspective, this model of conditional access could become a template for sensitive technology exports even beyond semiconductors. It represents a novel tool in balancing economic interest with geopolitical priorities, and could even lead to China buying more US soybeans, something Donald Trump has hinted at. Meanwhile, India's semiconductor ambitions, boosted by government incentives, rising AI investments, and Make in India initiatives, could also benefit from technology access, partnerships, or licensing models shaped by the US-China precedent. As US firms recalibrate strategies under geopolitical trade pressures, India could emerge as a more attractive alternative or collaborator in Asia's fast-growing tech ecosystem. Bureau Report, Business Today TV.
And now from technological rivalry and trade tensions, let's move on to the conflict zone of West Asia. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has defended his planned military takeover of Gaza City in the face of growing international condemnation and anger, with the United Nations officials warning that the move would lead to another calamity in embattled, starving enclave.
As Israel moves towards a potential military takeover of Gaza City, global condemnation is mounting against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is facing sharp criticism over his push to establish full military control over the region, a move that has significantly escalated the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas in the already devastated Gaza Strip. Despite the growing international pressure, Prime Minister Netanyahu has stood firm in defending his military strategy.
Israel's Security Cabinet instructed the IDF to dismantle the 2 remaining Hamas strongholds in Gaza City and the central camps. Contrary to false claims, this is the best way to end the war and the best way to end it speedily.
During an emergency UN Security Council meeting on August 10th, the Israeli and Palestinian ambassadors presented contrasting views on the conflict and proposed solutions to end the fighting in Gaza.
If its concern was actually security, it would have rallied this plan and should have been happy to see this plan adopted by almost the entire international community. Israel is seeking to cement its full military control over the Gaza Strip and is prolonging this war not to end Hamas rule or to disarm it, but to prevent independent Palestinian statehood.
This is not conquest. Israel has no plans or desire to permanently occupy Gaza. This is liberation from a brutal terror regime.
While Israel has faced sharp criticism from allies such as the United Kingdom, Russia, China and France, the United States has backed its ally and friend Netanyahu's military plans for Gaza.
The government of Israel did not make its decision to advance its military campaign in a vacuum, but after months of Hamas's intransigence. Hamas refuses to accept a ceasefire and continues to torture the hostages.
We must firmly oppose any attempt to occupy Gaza. The recent approval by Israel's Security Cabinet of a plan to take over Gaza is a measure of grave concern for China. We urge Israel to stop this dangerous move at once.
Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced that Australia will recognize Palestine as a state in September.
Today I can confirm that at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September, Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority. We will work with the international community to make this right a reality.
Australia is the latest country to join the growing list of nations recognizing a Palestinian state following early announcements by France, Britain and Canada. However, the turmoil in Gaza continues to intensify with each passing day. In the latest attack, 5 Al Jazeera journalists, including prominent reporter Anas al-Sharif, were killed in a targeted Israeli strike near Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital.
Al Jazeera journalists have been murdered in a targeted Israeli strike.
The UN Human Rights Office swiftly condemned the killing and called on Israel to ensure the protection of journalists operating in Gaza. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
Since Israel launched its first military strikes on Iran's nuclear sites during a 12-day war in June, inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency or IAEA have been unable to access Iran's facilities, despite IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi stating that the inspection remains his top priority. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that a senior official from the United Nations nuclear watchdog will fly to Iran for talks, but no visit to nuclear site is planned. Iran has accused the agency of effectively paving the way for the bombings by issuing a damning report on May 31st, which led the IAEA's 35-nation Board of Governors to declare that Iran is in breach of its non-proliferation obligations. Iran, which denies seeking nuclear weapon, said it remained committed to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Last month, Iran enacted a law passed by the parliament suspending the cooperation with IAEA. And that's all for this edition of World Today. For more international stories, do log on to India Today Global. Take care. And before that, we are leaving to another interesting story that imagine if you wanted to buy a high-tech robot today, where would you go? Well, Cyrus has the answer and be ready to be amazed. Take care. Good night.
In 2025, if you thought that a shopping mall is only good enough to buy groceries, maybe some fashion items, you are so wrong, because this is a reality right now. There is a shopping mall in Beijing, China, where you can buy a robot. I am not kidding. Now, this mall, one of the first in the world, showcases about 200 different kinds of robots from different companies. And even a company like Unitree is present, the same company that makes humanoid-like robots. Now, in terms of pricing, the range for these items start at $278, but it also depends upon the specifications that you want in your robot. But the best part is you can just walk into this mall, choose your particular robot or item that you want to buy and just walk out. It is that simple. Now, this is how we will be shopping for robots in the future. Now, this one has opened in China, but you can bet that these kind of malls will open in different parts of the world where people can experience them physically and then make their final buying decision. Another important detail about this location is that it is like a holistic experience center. Just like a car showroom, a person would have to go to this place and they would be able to not only just buy the robot, they will be able to service it, get there frequently, any questions that they have about the product answered, and it's like a holistic experience center. And that's the best part, because I don't think there would be other places that will be able to service robots. So all of your queries and troubleshooting can happen in one place. But what do you think about this whole future of robotics and shopping, going there and buying the robot yourself? Have we entered the future already? And would you buy a robot from a mall?